so much for coming. And I just wanted to make sure that some of the friends and family and speakers and older folk who need to have a chair have got their chair. So if you have one, please come have a seat. And if there's a seat free next to you, maybe you can. Okay.
Excuse me.
If you're not feeling well, if your foot hurts, if you wore the wrong shoes, corns.
We don't have a secret. You cannot see that. Too bad.
Every seat should be taken.
Every seat, it seems to be taken except for
Someone
that
who
seat.
needs a little love is feeling alone.
Oh, there you are.
There's Elaine and
We have one more right here.
Kathy old friends Marcs. You want to get good stories, sit between them. My brother has a seat next to him. And there's a seat next to Elaine Sunshine, who worked with Marc. And is a good friend of his. And she made these name tags, which I think are awesome. Thank you. And also in the same row are Richard and Julie, who have known Marc for ages and worked with him. And just sit down and I'm
Hello, everyone. My name is Beck, and it is.
Paula, do you have my speech? You did?
You didn't memorize it? The tension.
No.
This is a standing room only affair. And so what I'd like to ask us to do, first of all, is maybe a little counterintuitive, but could everyone please join me in a round of applause for Marc Rosenblatt? Sustained applause. This is a beautiful, a sad, and a happy occasion. And I first of all would like to acknowledge Marc's mom, June, a beautiful woman I just had the pleasure of meeting a few minutes ago. June, we love you.
Yes.
Marc had a taste for the theatrical. And
To say the least.
I think what I want you to know, first of all, the ground rules. Please leave on your cell phones. If you get a call, I would like you to answer it. We will quiet down to say something nice about Marc. A little later, we will all participate in a group project where we will all call somebody on our phones and say something nice about Marc. We have some speakers who, and in between this little remarks, there will be what we could call photographic interludes from Marc, some of his work. And I would like to see if I could prevail upon you for what I would call 100% participation. So please, if you're not a speaker, don't think you're off the hook, because we would like to hear from you. Something, a word, and there'll be a time for that. Later, towards the end, I would like to ask, or I will invite everyone who hasn't spoken who has something they would like to say, a few words, or just one word, to do that, so that we have 100% participation. We have 100% participation on the name tags, which is very impressive, but I noticed that nobody signed in. No one! No one signed in. So I don't know what that means.
We'll sign out.
We'll sign out. I have I'll be the first official speaker, then we have a great lineup for you. No, truly, some nice people. I'm so touched by Christina's effort to bring us together. Really. It's a true act of love, and in which we share. So I just like to say these things about Marc. I like Marc. And I've decided that I'm going to continue to like him for the rest of my life. Marc was not a cynic. When I heard about Marc's untimely death in January, my heart sunk into my stomach. This was a moment in life when things seemed to be totally out of it is not just unfair, but unkind. It was a snowy morning. A blizzard was marching up the East Coast. I was preparing to get on a plane. Flights were being canceled right and left. However, my flight, a connection to Philly, took off. I expected my luck to run out in Philly. More flights were canceled. Mysteriously, my next flight to Minneapolis took off in what was essentially a whiteout. As I landed, I had what I thought was a spiritual moment when I credited Marc with interceding on my path, with keeping the planes, my planes, flying. Then, as I thought about Marc some more, I laughed at how preposterous the idea was. I could hear him mocking me for being so lazy and superstitious. But if not a cynic, was Marc a pragmatist then? Well, I don't think that quite does him justice either. He was a dreamer, after all, in essential ways. But still, there was something remarkably sane and sensible about Marc. You didn't expect him to fall for a cockamamie story, though he might play along with it, just to prove how silly it was. He was too smart to suffer fools gladly, but he sometimes played the fool. He was perceptive and critical and grounded in his thinking, and yet his assessment of others was often unaccountably lenient. He gave you the benefit of the doubt, though it seemed he knew exactly when we were pulling the wool over our eyes. Was he part cynic and part sentimentalist, part pragmatist and part idealist? Probably. Why did he play along with our folly? There are a few people who defy labels the way Marc did. He was truly a goofball, and at the same time, he was deeply sensible, perceptive to the point of prophecy. I remember his way with my son, who is almost 4 years old now. He had this listening to my son, like everything he said had merit, and that he understood my son. Of course, my 4-year-old son loved him for this. Here was someone who seemed to speak his language, who understood the logic of his little boy brain. In just a few visits, as Marc hobbled around to keep up with my son, it seemed to me my son was slowing down for Marc. Literally slowing down. Why? I think my son knew that Marc was his friend and that he should slow down a little for his own good. Marc was a great babysitter for my son on the days he watched him. Clearly, he was a great dad though he stayed a boy to the end. His success with my boy was the proof, and his success had all to do with his ability to speak my son's language. We slow down for our film. Marc Rosenblatt spoke our language, but did we speak his? Today, I think we do. Thank you. Our first speaker, or second speaker, I guess, is the host of this memorial, who is the founder of this gallery, Sol.
Thank you, Beck.
And I'd say I'm the co-host, because the real host is Christina, and this is Rosenblatt. And I'm proud of this, because Marc was such an integral part of this space, and I'm sure he would be thrilled to see all these loved ones here, because he invested so much in this space. And I'll tell you what we're trying to do here and how Marc was part of all of that. But first, I'll tell you how I came to know Marc. And I'm a visual artist, and back in 2005, I needed some photographs of my artwork for a catalog. And I asked around in the community if somebody could recommend anybody, and Marc's name came up. So I contacted Marc, and he came to my studio in Greenpoint to take photographs. And he showed up with tons of heavy light equipment. And my studio was 2 flights up, so the very first thing he says to me is like, "Oh my God, there's no way we can carry all this heavy equipment up the stairs." And I go, "Oh my God, one other big tall guy who assumes that women can't do anything because we're women." So I go, "Come on, buddy, just grab your hand now and let's go." And then Marc goes, No, you don't understand. It's I'm the one who can't carry the equipment. And as a matter of fact, I'm actually a feminist." And that's true. He really was a feminist. And I've heard many guys claim to be a feminist, but I've never seen anybody live it to the extent that Marc did. Because he really was extraordinarily attuned to what it's like to be a woman. He was really, and he got us. And on many occasions, he actually apologized on behalf of his gender. So he was very, very special in that way, among many other ways. But that was the first thing that we bonded over. Because during that first, the day I met him in my studio, we had an initial laugh over that, and then we had a very good talk in my studio. And then later, that aspect of Marc being very understanding of women, that was reflected in the nickname that I used for him. And it's based on Marc's last name. I'm sure somebody knows what that actually means. Rosenblatt. Yes, it's a rose petal. Rose petal. So that's what I call him, petal. He was my petal. And it takes somebody who's very confident to deal with being called petal on a daily basis. So, but at this point, I didn't know so much about Marc yet. He did my photographs, and they came out really beautifully. And I figured, this is a guy I should stay in touch with. He's really cool. And at that point, this was in 2005, so he was involved at the Brooklyn Lyceum. And he put me on his mailing list, and I put him on mine for art exhibits, and we just kept in touch with what both parties were doing. And for some reason that never happened, but we stayed in touch. And then several years went by, and I didn't see him in person. But then in early 2011, I was offered the opportunity to use this venue here. And that's a whole long story, how that came into my hands. So I'm not going to bore you with that now, but if anybody is interested, I posted the whole story in the back room by the bathroom. So it's all there for you guys who want more background. But at any rate, I was offered to use this space and to show my own work. And I was thinking this is an opportunity to bring in artists from elsewhere who don't have a presence yet in the New York art scene. Oh yeah, by the way, I'm Norwegian, so I'm one of those foreign artists. And I brought in my colleagues from Norway for an initial series of shows that was just meant to be that, a temporary project, and then we would just pack up shop and be done with this. But I realized this is such a great opportunity to have a platform here on the Lower East Side. It's now a burgeoning art district, and it also in a place with such great history. Because one thing that's very appropriate for us today is that this building is actually started out as a synagogue. And technically, it still is a synagogue. That's what it says in the city's records. And if you look at the front, there are stars up top on the walls. And over the years, it's also been all kinds of other interesting things. It used to be, it was an Italian speakeasy back in the days. And then in the 70s and 80s, all kinds of artists used this space. So many people who later became famous have gone through here. Like Karen Finley did things here back in the days, and the rock band Television used to play here, and RuPaul had his Soul Train dances. So that's just a selection, and I could go on and on about that, but that will be for another time. Basically, I decided we have to try and do something to hold on to this place. And then after the initial series of shows, I decided to do another show with Norwegian artists in September 2011. And that's also the point when my colleague Anne Martha Mugas, who's the manager of this space on a daily basis, she came on board for that same show. We needed some 60mm film projectors for this particular project that we were going to show. And I have no experience with that kind of technical equipment, and nor did we have access to it anywhere. So I posted on Facebook that we need 60mm projectors. And can anyone help us? And then the one voice out of darkness that appeared was Marc. And at this point, I hadn't seen him for 6 years, but he saw that we need this thing and he would get it for us. So he hooked us up. But the story didn't end there, because the artist wanted us to do something really elaborate. Not only were we to show an old school celluloid film, but she wanted it looped. And that's something that they didn't do back in the day. So those projectors, they don't come equipped with what it requires to do a loop. So we had to improvise that. And there was no way I could just figure out how to do this. So I was thinking, this was a day before the show, and it was a madhouse in here with all the things that needed to happen. And I go, what am I going to do? I need help. Who am I going to call? And then I was just thinking, out of all the people that I know, or not even really know, because I didn't know Marc at that point, maybe he could do it. I just had a hunch. So I called Marc, and he showed up. And not only did he manage to make this work, but he dedicated his whole day to building that loop. And he went out to some kind of obscure shop way on the Upper East Side that nobody knows about anymore because nobody uses this equipment anymore. And it was raining, it was a horrible day, and he completely dedicated his whole day to making this happen. And of course, for no pay, because we don't have any budget. That was just because of his love of helping people and because he wanted to be involved. So that's how we kind of entered our little ambit. And then we realized this is a score. We need to keep Marc on board. He's so good at always coming up with the solution to technical things. And this happened to be just at the time in his life when he was moving out of Brooklyn Lyceum, and we kind of filled that void for him. He just got sucked into our little vortex instead, and we claimed him. So he became our technical manager, the guy who always had the answers for technical issues, which we have all the time. And over the course of working with Marc, me personally, because he really had a very special talent for being a friend. He's one of the most generous people I've ever met, and so in tune to what's going on with other people, and so his willingness to just drop whatever he has on his plate and just help whatever person or situation needs help. It's really extraordinary. So we were so happy to have him here, and he helped so many people through this platform only, because of course we weren't the only thing that he was involved with. He helped a lot of people. But here in this space, what we're trying to do is that our name is NOoSphere. I don't know if anybody is familiar with what that term means. Okay, all right, I need to wrap it up here. But basically, it's we've brought in a lot of we bring in artists from elsewhere to try and connect them with the New York City art scene. And we've shown about 200 people at this point from other countries. And when Marc passed away, I got droves of messages and emails and greetings from everybody whose lives Marc has touched. And it's such a great loss for all of us that we no longer have him. But he did manage to leave a mark on so many people's lives, and he really made a difference for so many people. So thank you, Marc, for everything you did for us. I don't know what we're going to do without you.
Kerry, do we have some pictures that you want to show?
I need to be able to swap that projector with this projector.
So how about we do that for the next one after
Okay.
Todd speaks?
And I'll
We're surrounded by these images, and there's some video in the other room too. Feel free to wander back there a little later. Next, I'd like to welcome one of Marc's roommates from Syracuse University. Some of his happiest memories were from those years. His good friend, Todd Rogers. Thank you.
When I first got to Syracuse University, I was, I would say, something of a jock. I was into sports and drinking beer and chasing girls, and I didn't really think much about stuff. And I was also into computers. And I wanted to make these cool graphic things that I saw on TV. So they stuck me in the art schools. I grew up with all these artists. And so it was sometime during my first year when walking back and forth between classes, I noticed this guy who would be like popping up next to me and just start talking to me. Okay. And yeah, who is this weirdo? You know? And so we conversed, we talked more, and you know, we ended up in classes together, doing a lot of the same sort of stuff. And eventually we became close friends and co-conspirators and collaborators, and then some housemates. And you know, what I learned in that getting to know Marc, he was such a different person for me, and he was you know, engaged me deeply. He talked on levels that I wasn't used to. Like in my background, people didn't talk about anything. He wanted to talk about everything. Okay, so. And he also just listened to me probe my depths in a way that I think he got to know me himself, and a lot of him, just in how he showed so much of himself. And see a lot of heads nodding out there. That's the Marc experience, and just about everybody in this room has had that. He's the guy that you meet for 10 minutes. And remember for the rest of your life, you know, because he makes that impact. He was the best man at my wedding, and I have family on both sides who met him only that day who still would ask me about him years later, about Marc. How's Marc doing? He made that impression. And over the years, he's been just a tremendous support for me. He was not only the best man at my wedding, but the best man through my divorce. So, truth be told. And so it's the tremendous support for me during those times, and always the best man on the end of the line for any situation. one of our collaborations in college, Marc had this idea. He wanted a picture of himself like in a blue flame. Okay, so even in that primitive age, there are any number of ways you could accomplish this feat. But Marc wanted to do it live. Okay, that was more authentic that way. It's the truth, right? So I'll never forget. I mean, it blazing in my mind is this image of a match duct taped to the end of a wooden broomstick. The oven door closed with the gas building up to an appropriately dangerous level. So I, as a brilliant college student, would like to think that I tried to talk him out of this, but whether that happened or not, I was roped in. So anyway, the first couple of tries were just total duds. Nothing happened, and I was the trigger man on the camera, and Marc was the fireman. Okay, so but then suddenly success, and this blue flame shot out of the oven, and just about blew the windows out of the kitchen. Just about blew the windows out. Of course, I was so stunned by the whole thing, I forgot to hit the button. so the picture of Marc engulfed in a blue flame never happened. It doesn't exist.
It does now.
You got it. There with the corn, right? So we've got. I think what I want to say also is just that, I think if there's a tragedy about Marc's life, it's not so much in the ending of it. It's that more folks didn't get to know his brilliance, his creative genius, his interpersonal genius, and that maybe he didn't recognize that enough of himself. But the gift of his life is that which we've all received, just that incredible interpersonal connection that he made with so many of you all and so many others who aren't even here today. And I would just invite all of us to keep that in mind, to keep that with us as some kind of an inspiration that Marc can serve through all of us. So, thank you.
Thank you.
He was the best man at my wedding and the best man at my divorce. It's true. All right. Next, are you ready to? Where are you going to screen these anyway?
Well, we have this old-fashioned slide projector here,
Yeah.
and we haven't checked to see if the pictures are forward, backwards, upside down, or whatever.
But do
And
you
it's
have
gonna
a
be
surface to project?
the white wall over there is going to be it. There are people in front, and the image size is very small because the projector is not far
Okay,
enough
so
away.
let's see a few and then see what that looks like. Okay.
Lights go off for this time.
What?
Lights go off for this time.
Just a few images.
Can we raise that up? Now, I'm also at a loss because there's no narration. I don't know what these are. So hopefully many of you can kind of chime in.
Just its face.
I think this one's upside down.
That was shot in Albany in one of our collaborations. It's up on the wall there.
A reflection shot, very nice.
Florida, where his grandparents lived. Down in Northern Ireland.
I'm guessing an Arab country.
No, that was, I think it was Germany, that was like a tour bus in Syracuse, I believe. That sounded like a campus tour bus. It was Purim.
Some construction?
I think it was a great place.
Okay.
Oh, he documented that pretty well, didn't he? Nikki Jones?
Love.
That's Meryl with
Great.
Kerry McCarthy.
Who knows who that is? Wow. Is that Marc behind the camera? No.
No, Marc took the picture.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
More earthquake? Wow.
Oh, wow.
That's amazing. For those of you in the back, the house went off its foundation. It's quite tilted in the back. I'm sorry the picture can't be any larger. Oh. Yeah.
There's Marc and I in drag, actually.
All right.
Okay.
Okay, we'll pick this up in a few minutes. So it's just a brief interlude. Okay. I hope everyone who's standing and realizes that they won't get a seat.
There's one seat there.
There won't be like people leaving during intermission. I don't think. All right. So if anybody, if it's really crowded, you know, there is really very little room over here as well. But a little.
Camera closer to the bathroom.
Yeah, and then that's right. The bathroom is back here.
Come here's the seat. Come on. Who wants it?
All right. So now, Julie, where are you? Oh, okay. This is the graphic designer of the program today. She's beautiful. This is also a friend from Syracuse, Julie Meridy.
I'm Julie Meridy from Syracuse. I met Marc at Syracuse, but our paths connected through various states, through Connecticut and here in New York City. And I want to bring you back to a moment in our history. It was the summer of 1988, and Marc and I found ourselves back in Connecticut. He was working as a photo assistant and I as a waitress, both saving our money to begin our next adventure in life. We took long walks comparing notes about growing up in Connecticut, our days at Syracuse, and where our journeys would lead us next. At the beginning of the summer, I learned of a juried art exhibition at the Bridgeport Museum of Art, Science, and Industry, showcasing new artists. So I set about to convince Marc to enter his bathroom sink photo, which is at the front of the gallery. While culling through the pages of the application, this was pre-online registration, and the specifications on matting, size, color, framing, Marc just seemed ambivalent. It made him uncomfortable having to conform to an established set of rules, especially pertaining to his artwork. But after lots of nudging, he relented, and only the submissions were due the very next day. And he had to work. He had to work the next day, and he had no way of getting it down to Bridgeport. So I told him if he gets his photo ready by noon, I would pick it up and drive it to Bridgeport in between my double shift at the restaurant. Now, all he needed to do was to find a way to get the photo framed to specification overnight in West Hartford, Connecticut. So in typical Marc fashion, he found a way to get it done. Piecing together the required elements and clipping the last piece of the frame as we were putting it into my car. Needless to say, not only did he get in, but he was awarded Best Work for Photography. Yay. The opening of the show was a real proud moment for him. And at the end of the day, the judges recognized in Marc's work, the creativity, thoughtful, and passionate soul that he was. I want to just say one thing about Marc's work and about him, and the picture in the front, which won him the award. And what's so special about it is the ability to create images of isolated objects or a solitary moment in life and give them a sense of identity and meaning. And I hope you enjoy all the works here today and find that sense of meaning. Michael in his field, his grandfather, or his monumental photo of a bathroom sink, I think they convey a powerful sense of being alone. So yesterday, as I once again found myself rushing to the gallery with Marc's photos for an exhibition, only this time I knew that he was getting in.
All right, now I would like everybody to take out your cell phones. And please, if you wouldn't mind, make a quick call to somebody who didn't know Marc and tell them something special about Marc. All right? We're going to do this in 2 minutes. And if you get an answering machine, that's fine. You could leave a message. For those of you who don't have cell phones, where is it?
Hi, JP. You get what we're doing? Have you seen this on this live stream thing? That's all you're making calls for.
That's live stream.
What's supposed to be
Calling what? Calling Griff?
Okay.
Gary, your streaming is not working.
All right. Thank you so much. So now a few more people know about Marc. We didn't know him, but somebody who knew him well and who is another good friend from Syracuse is coming up to say a few words. Chris.
So, about 6 weeks ago, we had a little impromptu gathering, and I tried to ad-lib it, and it didn't go very well. And so you'll have to forgive me that I didn't act this out this time. Marc and I, as we just heard, we went to Syracuse with Todd and Greg together. They were very formative years for all of us. We were finding ourselves and finding our legs and finding a new language that we discovered, and we can communicate in this abstract new language that really kind of gave us insights not only into each other but into ourselves. And that was a very special thing. That was a very special thing for us all to discover together, and it's kept us tight all these years later. But I want to take this in a little different direction today, and I'd like to talk about options and opportunities. And why do we amass great wealth in education? To have options. And having options leads to having opportunities. As a father, I try and impress the importance to my son of working hard and learning how to compassionately compete in this world, because the work that we do together today is going to directly impact the types of options and opportunities he's going to have the rest of his life. Princeton or Florida State, new Porsche, old Buick. Greenwich or the Bronx, martinis or heroin. Now I think of Marc. Marc with the C. That's the first clue upon meeting him that he was a little bit different. And I think that for some of us, the options and opportunities which are in front of us aren't always tangible.
Yeah.
They're not always things that present themselves to us clearly. Sometimes they present themselves as traps or prisons. In fact, they can hide from us, trick us, deceive us. Sometimes they are cruel and show themselves only after they have expired. Options and opportunities can present themselves as being wholly out of your control. Most of us understand today that the best options come from within. They are born, fed, nurtured, just like the rest of our needs. When depression comes, or with depression, comes the realization, sometimes true and sometimes not, that we have reduced options and opportunities compared to what we think we should have, or to what those around us have. We have nothing to call our work. We lose our money, we lose our friends, our family disappears. The ability to keep pace with those around us is no longer an option. We're homeless, we can't care for ourselves. We fall prey to the very system that we helped to put in place, whose job it is to hide us away from our better selves. We're forgotten and then we become invisible. The ability to survive comes from the ability to keep the options flowing in the hopes that opportunities will follow. Many of us are on the outside of the larger corporate world, its structure and its rewards. We go it alone, we roll the dice. Marc was certainly of that world. It requires a faith in yourself that you alone can keep those options flowing. You tell those around you that you're going to make your own options, that you can't sit behind a desk for 10 hours a day. It takes courage. You make tough choices every day and the stakes are high. I think that one of the most frightening things in this world, certainly for me, is the realization that you're losing your options. Or imagine, your tank is dry. Survival depends upon the ability to know that this isn't true. That while you may have blind spots, you can still make something out of thin air. That another option or an opportunity will come soon. I've known a few people who have battled depression their whole lives. I listen and I watch and I think to myself that these broken people are actually much stronger than the rest of us normal people. They fight every hour to overcome, to push on, until one day they don't. They somehow unfathomably get convinced that there are no options left. The presence of us all in this room today is proof of Marc's ability to overcome the feelings that he carried for as long as I knew him, that he was broken and he couldn't fit in our world. Marc traveled the world and touched so many lives until one day he didn't.
So now, next up is Gary. Consented to play an obscure musical instrument, which may not be obscure to you, but you can tell us a little bit about it. I think it's called the zaffoon.
It's called the zaffoon. It's made out of bamboo. It has a tenor sax reed, so it sounds 2 octaves lower than an octave. I did not know Marc that long. I married into the family about 8 years ago. But we were both photographers. And one day I was giving a seminar in New York, and he happened to walk in to look, and he got so excited. Gary, this is great. You got to videotape this. And I'm the guy to do it, so we can sell it. And he was right. And we started to work together. And in September, he was supposed to be in charge of the production for videotaping the seminar. Obviously, that hasn't happened. But I also know that he also is in love with lots of different kinds of music. And some of it, performance artists like Laurie Anderson, which doesn't go well with the Zaphoon. Jewish music goes wonderfully. There's an old Russian song which the Jews have adopted. Feel free to sing along in Russian if you know it, or clap at the right times if you don't.
You know how sometimes people at gatherings, weddings, bar mitzvahs, when there are receptions, everybody, they make an announcement. It is my great pleasure to welcome Marc's roommate in San Francisco, Kerry McCarthy.
Yay.
Thank you, Beck. Christina, June. Yeah, I'm not used to public speaking a lot, so I have it all written out. So I just want to start with, hey there. This is a phrase Marc used in his salutations and on the phone, in a text message, and I'm still in disbelief that I won't ever see that hey there pop up in a text or hear it on a voicemail, followed by a long rambling message. So hey there to all of you whose lives intersected with Marc's like mine did. I think that Marc would love this gathering, and before telling you why, just a bit of background. Marc and I were friends for 25 years. We met in San Francisco through roommate referral, and Victoria Ashley, another Syracuse graduate. I had the opportunity to connect with Marc about 3 years ago when I was in Manhattan for several months, and we got to spend a bit of time together talking and reminiscing. One poignant memory we both had about San Francisco was about the Thanksgiving that we hosted back then. We didn't have that much at good old 2020 McAllister. So we had to put together tables, chairs, napkins, food, candles, basically everything for this event. And we had to get it from all different places and from it all come together. But it did. And we had quite an assortment of people there. June was there with Mr. Rosenblatt, relatives and friends, and it was purely a magical convergence, as only California can do, of purpose and spirit that made it more, really very something significant for the memory. Marc thrived in these types of situations and loved it. I remember after the San Francisco earthquake in '89, we just saw those pictures there, Marc was first out of the gate to help in the marina, giving out sandwiches and taking pictures and hanging out for days with the other rescue workers, and a large portion of them were female too. Throughout the year in San Francisco, he was always bringing people he had just met back to the apartment to tell us about their story. Not his story, their story. I remember one time how energized he was coming back from Big Sur when he had hung out with artists and writers living in the house Henry Miller had lived in. I don't know if you, Marilyn, knows that part. He really could be so captivated by the art of creating. One time back in San Francisco, he said he wanted to show me something he had made, and we drove out on his Vespa that he used to ride around on to the San Francisco Armory, full of abandoned buildings. Somehow, he had managed to get into one of these buildings, somehow. He created a gallery of photos of his and a friend of his, and all these photos sitting out in the stark but sunny Armory. Creating something there really, truly out of nothing. So Marc, he loved characters, loved to imitate voices of people, intrigued always by how people spoke, how they moved, how they felt about the world, and he loved the art to try it out. One time he made a guest appearance in a book club of mine where we were all reading Love in the Time of Cholera. Garcia Marquez.
Who just died.
Yes, we did. Marc hadn't read a page of it at the time, but fake that he had. It was hilarious in how he would ride the wave of it, and in the end, root out any pompousness in any of us. He was the first to detect a bullshitter in his midst. If anyone put on airs about themselves, Marc was always the first responder, ready to hatch it into them. I will always keep in mind how he would laugh that infectious laugh, and that searing sense of humor of his will be so missed. It already is. So why would Marc like this gathering? Back to that Thanksgiving in San Francisco with the assortment of friends and relatives coming together with a big unknown hovering, wondering how it will all come together. Isn't that us today, drawn here from all different places with spirit and heart? And what about the Armory with all of his pictures that we have here today, a mesmerizing viewing? And it all has come together quite beautifully. Marc, and we wish you were here. In closing, I would like to say a few words about the great hereafter. It's highly debatable about what's next for all of us. One version might have Marc in a white robe singing off-key in a choir.
On key, he was a good singer.
Yeah, well, totally improving. Yeah. The version I prefer is that Marc is in an entirely different place, unlike anything we know, and he is roaming around there now, exploring the new culture, the new people, trying out the language, tasting the food, the music, pissing a few people off, but definitely making them laugh. So I'd say to them, enjoy your time with Marc while he's there, and that we are awfully glad he touched down on our universe for a while. Thank you.
Just a fair warning, after our next speaker, I'm going to ask people in the room to just put out words, just one word at a time. and just see what that's like. But our next speaker is Rudy. This is Rudy Benda.
I have to stand before you with my hand in front of my mouth, not because I have to sneeze, but I've worked with Marc for 14 years, and he was always pulling practical jokes on me. Many of them at the worst times. I'd be livid with him, but most of the time he always laughed. Well, today he pulled another one of his little tricks. He made me lose the only front tooth that is a fake tooth in my mouth. So bear with me if my pronunciation is a little peculiar. As I said, I've known Marc for about 14 years. My company was a special event company. We produced events all over the United States and Europe, Far East. And when I met Marc at an event in New York, he was not hired by me, but I had a lot of interaction with him. And he just was everywhere, doing everything. Setting up, doing the lights, doing the sound, putting up the screens, whatever had to be done, he was doing it. And well, and was not my experience of people in my business doing it so quickly and doing it so well. So we became friends, dear friends, and he became my illustrious tech director, lighting director, sound director, and ultimately when the show began, the stage manager. And the stage manager indeed rules. So rarely did we have confrontations, but when we did, they were wonderful. Getting angry with one another, him telling me to fuck off, my telling him to fuck off, and we'd come together, and it was just honest, and I appreciated it. Christina gave me a couple of letters that Marc had written to various people, and I chose two of them to read to you. Both of them were written by Marc when he was living in Portland. Both were in 1996. And I'd like to ask Christina, Eli, is Eli here, or is Eli's mother here?
He's in Seattle.
Hi.
His sister is here.
Hi. This is Eli's mother and sister.
Although we're not sure that's actually to that Eli because it's such a curious letter, so read it.
Oh, okay. This is a letter to Eli.
Disavowing.
You be the judge, but it seems
He was 2 at the time, I believe.
I know, it's just in a whole new light.
It's not a letter to a 2-year-old because he talks about condoms and all kinds of things.
Maybe it's Marc. Maybe that's so it's ready.
Yeah, he wanted Plan B. Or he sent it to you knowing that you would read it to him eventually. But here's the letter written on January 16th of 1996. I have seen Portland grow from a podunk city town to an obnoxious Land Rover, sport utility, Bentley, hurry up and wait, blah blah city. It's an easy city to be poor in, but my next move is to go back to New York City in a few years. I actually miss the cold and snow. Here in Portland, there are 2 seasons: cold rain, warm rain. I may or may not be here when you come, literally. That is to say, my work hopefully be working my ass off on some big budget union show, doing who cares what, working 6 to 14 days, and bringing home the big budget payoff money. Right now, I am tooling up to be Mr. Handyman, Carpenter, Electrician, Electrician dude guy, person for my landlord. I am turning into a tool-talking, screw-gunning, horsepower revving Jew. I'm glad my mom is able to reach down into other people's minds. She has been doing that for me for, well, a long time. Your mom is pretty cool, too. I used to have a crush on her. Still do, I guess. But the age thing, you know. Remember, this was back in '96, okay? Well, take care. Call the day before you come, and thanks for not smoking, Marc. This next letter was written in January 29th, which is my birthday, in 1996. Dear Mom and Dad, well, it's like this. It finally turned winterish the other day. It snowed a lot. We got some good snow, wet, heavy, and nicely compacted. It melted in 2 days. 2 days later, it got cold. I felt the wind trying to knit at my throat, but my nice scarf kept it warm. My new hat kept the sun out of my eyes and the rain and snow off my shoulders. My hat's brim is wide, not obnoxiously, but just so. A nice blue-gray color, unusual for hats, they say. I have been looking for one for a long time. I finally went into John Helmer's. Is anybody familiar with that? John Helmer's store, artist of hats. I finally went into John Helmer's and they were having a half-off sale. I was skeptical. With the pocket watch said, "This one looks the best." I agreed. He makes custom hats and repairs them, blocking and whatnot. Sometime I will have to have him make a custom hat for me. This hat is really a dress hat. He goes on about this. This hat is really a dress hat. That is to say, not for every day, of course. A bit too soft at the starting gate. I love that sentence. This hat somehow keeps Gramps, Grandma, Grandpa Jaime, and Uncle Jack in mind. I love the fact that my parents had parents who loved to read and had ideas, and I think values that were taught to their kids, and so on. I sit here at my computer after a hard 7 days of remodeling man stuff. I just watched Il Postino, sweet film. I came home to my mess, which always happens to me when I get busy, or I guess I could put my footnote, it's always a mess. I will take tomorrow to sift through my piles, and well, I did do my laundry today. A+ for that. It's too bad here. It's not too bad here. It's not too bad here. I can find work whenever I need to. I do not work for too many assholes and can take off whenever I want and go back east for 10 days or so. I finally relax into the winter unemployment, underemployment thing. I go from project to project, still trying to photograph when I can. I got a cover shot in the local black newspaper without even trying. My goal for the winter is to take time in the lab and print a portfolio. Then in the spring, I'll be able to schlep it around and get more jobs. I've enclosed a small promo thing I did for my still photography jobs. Things on film, commercials, and etc. Have sent only 20 out. Some nice letters have come back, but no work. No problem. I will see you soon. Love. Thank you.
Good. All right, so now, why don't you sit here? You're going to be next. But, everyone, we're going to do this little thing. Just for a minute or so, I'd like us to maybe turn off the lights again. And if we could just, anybody who can think of a word that they just want to throw out and say, just to put in the room in this nice gathering.
Instigator.
Difficult.
Smart.
Hilarious.
Love.
Intense.
Love.
Funny.
Love.
Generosity.
Chutzpah.
Tenacity.
Insight.
Funny.
Potato masher.
Amused.
Sincere.
Intellectual.
Yes.
Nurturing.
Deep.
Brave. Caring.
Grateful.
Friend.
Liberated. Sensitive.
Feminine. Interested.
Philosophical.
Silly.
Unexpected.
Curious.
Intuitive. Mischievous.
Gorgeous.
Yes.
Talented.
Artistic.
Clever.
Imaginative.
Adventurous.
Worldly.
Kind.
Open.
Bad handwriting.
Real.
Honest.
Thank you, Marc. Turn on the lights. The main thing is that you know that this has been a huge success and that Marc loves you for this and loves everybody in this room for coming and for being so generous and so friendly. I want to have you now take the floor, and then after we'll just open it for a few more brief remarks. Anybody who wants to say anything. We're calling this the Q&A. I don't know. It's kind of funny. But please welcome Christina Knight.
I'm here, getting your beverage. You want a beverage?
Yeah, I mean, that's like following you, and it's like following Marc. It was, thank you for
You're welcome.
bringing him back.
My pleasure. I loved him very much.
He loved you.
He did.
Well, I wanted to say something today, so I wrote something up. When I asked my mom for her thoughts about Marc after he died, without missing a beat, she said, "He hung my sun and moon."
Oh.
And I was struck that she felt the same way about him that I did. And that she said it so poetically. And then after a few seconds, I realized she was talking about the ones Marc hung above the garage door. Give Marc a ladder, and he will find a way to hang your sun and moon.
And star.
And star. And he'll make you happy every time you come home. Marc and I met via a dating website in 2012. After some long phone conversations, enjoying his soothing voice and the perfect bait for me, talk of exotic travel, like places like Antarctica, we finally met for a first date. It was around 9:30 p.m. on a weeknight at a corner bar in Brooklyn. I was exhausted from work. He came into the room. He was wrapping up his bicycle to a meter, and I was in there ahead of him. And he came in, and he was going to sit across from me, and I just patted the bench next to me. And so he came, and he sat down, and I just kind of, I was like this, kind of. I said, "How was your day, honey?" And he really liked that. We were entering the third month of our relationship when my dad, Phil Knight, who's here today, next to my mom, Edith, we were entering the third month of our relationship when my dad was taken to the hospital in an ambulance, feverish and disoriented. My mother was in Germany. She had just left for what should have been a month. I was at home in the city, and as I prepared to rush north upstate, it didn't occur to me to ask Marc to come. And when I became a bit confused by his preparations to head out the door with me, he said, "Of course I'm coming, I'm your boyfriend." And I was really surprised that he would go through this inconvenience, stay by my side, but that said more about my expectations of a 3-month relationship than my young love feelings for Marc. Within 24 hours, it was so obvious that Marc's presence was nearly more important than my own. My dad had life-threatening pneumonia. Marc was instrumental at everything from figuring out, well, what meds was my dad taking? The doctors didn't know. His doctor was probably playing golf. But yeah, I couldn't reach him. So we were in the house trying to figure out, like, well, what is my dad on already? And Marc did that. And he communicated with the medical staff. And also, very importantly, he helped my father relax as he became anxious at what was happening to him in the ICU. And the next day, he'd be drugged unconscious for the following 2 weeks. So that's how bad it was. And my father confided his anxiousness to Marc. And he'd met Marc maybe a couple weeks before. And it was not to me that he confided this. And Marc sat next to his bed, and he gave him visualizations and breathing exercises. And perhaps this is something he was learning at graduate school, which he completed that summer. Perhaps it was from helping his father die peacefully at home about 3 years before. So that summer, Marc and I spent a lot of time at the hospital. Other than at our kitchen tables, the spot we've eaten the most together is the Orange County Regional Medical Center cafeteria. This delicate time of my dad's recovery was a clear window into Marc's depth of compassion, his compassion for people, and his commitment to me. I had never known I could depend on someone like that before, or had been so heartily invited to do so. It's hard to know what to share today. Most of you knew Marc many more years. I knew him just shy of 2 years. We all knew Marc's wonderful caring, his humor, his sincerity, and his searching. And for those who knew him through me, I hope you saw long ago how happy and in love and at home I was with Marc, who made me feel so loved. I once experienced in a brief hazy pulse the familiar but forgotten sensation of a child who feels utterly safe and cared for by the body cradling its own. The highlights of our relationship were many. There were the breakfasts that Marc often prepared while I got ready for work. There were Marc's homemade dinners, including his signature quinoa, bok choy, eggplant, and tofu. There was holding hands, and especially talking in bed. I usually asked for more time before turning out the light, so we could talk more and so I could look at him. And you know, some of you in this room might know, but he looks really great. It's a good angle. So you know, he'd be like, "Can I turn the light off now?" I'm like, "No. I found him so handsome, and he would tell me that no one else had ever gone on so much about his looks. At least I was the most vociferously attracted to Marc. I suppose our brief time together let us keep feeling the gratitude every night we settled down together, and every morning we began with each other. We would each announce when one of us felt the magic pixie fairy dust of the early days make its occasional giddy return. When I think of Marc, he is at a table setting's distance away, not across the table, but close along the curve at his or around the corner of mine. This is all to say we were at home with one another. Who knew what made it work so well? We weren't opposites, but we were different. I loved Marc like I have loved no other, and was grateful for having him in my life. He taught me about love, and he showed me it constantly, whether it was asking me, "Have I told you I loved you today?" or just me coming home to find him mopping the floor of my apartment. I loved him and cuddled him and prodded him. We were really happy together. I just like doing anything with you, Marc would say when we were outside somewhere, maybe walking, and I felt the same. So, want you to know I was a little stressed out the past couple of weeks. I got into this mode of worrying about plates and napkins and tins and needles. But today, as soon as people started arriving, I was so happy to see each and every one of you, people I've never met before, that you came here to celebrate Marc. Made me so happy, and I wasn't stressed, and I wasn't sad. I felt great. And I'm going to miss people, but Anna Marta and Sol, if Anna Marta could stand up and stretch her legs. This is Anna Marta, the gallery manager. You heard about her and Sol, but Anna Marta hung all this work, and I want to thank Nick the fireman, as Marc calls you. Oh, Becky's here. Beck for the late night phone calls of me saying, calm me down, right? Yeah. Of course, everyone who has shared their remarks and remembrances and letters, thank you very much for that. And Julie Meridy, who talked about the this is her wonderful design, and she also made these great snapshot tributes in that area right there. She also took Marc's notes, which were some numbered squares on these pieces of paper, and these form boards. Photos of his grandpa, Sam Miller, and clearly Marc wanted to exhibit them in some way, and Julie interpreted this and reproduced it. So that's some of the work that Julie said. Stephanie Nova, the woman who came the shortest distance. She's in the back window. Stephanie, I just want to say, is an amazing friend, and the fact that she's such a professional is a great boon to this event. She gave a lot of advice about, have you thought of this, have you thought of that, and then she said, just give me the numbers, give me the emails, I'll take care of it. And she really did that. That's my phone.
But the stranger was calling back to say she really doesn't know Marc.
Do you want it? Just to shut it. Take it. It was a 212 number. I don't know. I live in Brooklyn. Kelly Dugan, here by this Jumpy series that was created with Marc and Todd. Kelly Dugan spent a lot of time with me at Marc's apartment. She lives in this neighborhood, and you sat through some slides with me. You filled some carousels.
He has a lot of slides.
And she also went through and just gathered all the books and put them on the bookshelf. And she was an amazing person to be with, and I'm so glad that you live in that neighborhood and that you were there. She also formatted the label. The labels more than anything else, and then she said, just send them to me, and she formatted them and Sol printed them out, and they're not all labeled, but there's some nice little stories, like Nick provided some background to the photographs that he took of their teenage and college bike trips. Gary Friedman, who played the Zaffoon, and he filled the size 13.5 shoes of Marc as technical director of this production. And there are videos in the back that are on a loop that you'll see from Marc's college days. He majored in video arts. There are these slides, and thank you. You put a lot of hours into figuring out how this is all going to happen.
Quite welcome.
And it's going to share it with many more people, so thank you. Eileen Sunshine, raise your hands. Eileen Sunshine. Marc met Eileen as an intern at, well, should we say Brooklyn AIDS Task Force?
Right, back then it was.
And now it is
Bridging Access to Care.
Bridging Access to Care. It includes housing placement, which is how Marc began being employed.
Right.
And
He became a therapist.
And he became a therapist.
He was an amazing, amazing therapist.
And Eileen was an amazing supervisor, and I'm so glad you bridged that gap. You let yourself be a friend to him, and him be a friend to you. And
it's funny when we were doing the phone thing, you know, like look through your phone and call somebody that doesn't know Marc. Everybody on my phone knew Marc. Everybody in my family, my mother, my sister, everybody, because he was in my personal life and also in my work life, and every single one, I was like, nope, 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 nope. I actually didn't make the call. Everyone knows Marc. And he loved you so much. So much. You brought him so much happiness. Like, when I met him years ago, when he first came as an intern, one of the things, like, he and I would talk, and he'd say, I need to find somebody. I want to find somebody. He's like, can you hook me up? You know, he set me up on a date. And that was like our thing. We'd go back and we're like, how about her? You know, we'd try to set him up. When he met you, the joy that I could see in him, just, you made a huge difference in his life. He was looking for you for so long.
Are there any other, anybody else would like to say just a few words?
oh, but I want to say one thing. Eileen made these name tags. So I'm really happy that everyone, I hope if there's people you've heard of or people you don't know, that you find new stories about Marc that you hadn't heard from someone else. And I want to thank Carol, Marc's cousin. She made some mandelbrot, which is placed on that table over there and by my. And also more Pittman brought in many sweets and desserts. Some more and Eric, raise your hands. Yeah. And to everyone who lugged a cold drink over, there's a lot of requests of you to bring a beverage with you. Thank you. So thank you everyone for coming today and letting me remember Marc through you. That's how we're going to be together. That's how we're going to keep Marc alive. Thank you.
For the Q&A, anybody?
I would just like to say a few words. My name is Richard. I'm Julie's husband. I just want to say I am not a big hugger, but I will sorely and sincerely miss Marc's big hugs. I think he would be shocked to hear that, but
thank you.
My name's Greg. I'm a friend from Syracuse, and this has been. My brain and heart are just about to explode. It's been, Marc is just a soul brother, and I feel terrible that I just wasn't in touch with him for the last, 20 years or so. When I heard about this, it just, all I want to do is to see Marc, so intensely. And I feel like I'm doing that today. Also just seeing all these photos, as a photographer, this is what we did. This is how we all bonded, putting our photos on a wall. And it's, I haven't been in that situation in many years. And you try and find stuff, and you crop everything else out, you take a picture of it, and it means something to you. It means everything to you. And I'm looking at, this picture of a block of cement with some, I look at it now, you see this block of cement with some bolts in it, and, like, I don't know if that means anything to anybody, but like, to me, I totally get it, you know, and it's like, that's like where we all were, so it's just great to see all that. And speaking of photos, I usually don't do a lot of public speaking, but I brought along a picture of Marc. This is a 3D photo that I took of him at graduation at Syracuse, and I feel like it really captures Marc, and he's in the photo with his dad in the background, and I really would like you to have it, so I'm going to pass it around, and be sure to get this before you leave.
Thanks so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't want to hear that. No? Okay. My name is Freda.
But speak up, okay.
I'm not really Aunt Freda, and Marc told me that I think he must have been about 35 at the time. When I was talking to him like this, and I said to him, you could get rid of the aunt now. June and I are very old friends. We know each other from high school. So I know Marc sort of since the day he was born. And I don't want to read a laundry list of things, but to me one of the interesting things is a lot of people are talking about his photographs and his artwork and stuff like that. And I think that those were a side of him and skills that a lot of people didn't know about and we're beginning to know about. And that's sort of very special. Sorry. I think he was accepting and open, and then he was lucky enough to meet Christina, who he loved a lot and who loved him, and they were two special people. And the saddest thing is that you don't really know how this story that started out so great, you don't know how it's really going to end. I think it was going to end great, and I think it was too. And it's nice when two special people find each other, and too bad we don't have the end of the story. Okay, thank you.
I may have come the farthest from Gainesville, Florida. My name is Eva Eggensteiner, and I went to Syracuse with Marc and with Greg, and is that Chris Paul back there? Yeah. And my friend Allison Levy. And we were all photography students. Marc always had a special place in our classroom and in our studio. He, I'm looking at all these photographs and remembering that when he took this trip, I was working at the Museum of Natural History, and he forced me to get online to communicate with him. So every lunch break I had, I would go on the computer and we would exchange information about what he was doing. And I thought he was so brave and so crazy to do that. And I think that he leaves with all of us that sense of adventure and just that go for it attitude in life. And if there's one thing that I will always try to remember about Marc is that love and passion for life and his. So a word that would come to mind is brave, and his phrase was always with us, what'd you have for breakfast? That was the icebreaker. Life was so heavy for him, but he wanted it to be so light. So I'm very lucky to be here. I'm so excited to meet you, Christina. Thank you.
Anybody else?
All right, I'll say something. I wasn't going to say anything. My name is Allison Levy. I met Marc in Syracuse when he asked me to do some writing for him. So I've known Marc from Syracuse, from San Francisco, when we lived there at the same time, and as well as in New York. And the one thing I will say about Marc, there's a lot of things, but he had such a sense of perseverance. And no matter how much you might fall out of touch with him, he really kept on with the friendship, and he really pushed to make those connections and keep them strong, even if you didn't have the time or the space. He was very good about that, and it is a testament to see all these people here who loved him, and to see some of the work from 20 plus years ago, and I'm looking forward to meeting you as well. He had called me up, I guess prior to your trip. He was looking for a food stylist, or I guess a cousin or someone had Trader Joe's or somewhere in the mix. In any event, he wanted to come up and pay a visit, and I invited him up, and he said that he was going out with his honey to Europe. And I was very glad to hear that. So I know that even though he might not express it to me that he was very in love, I could tell because we talked often throughout the many years about who he was involved with, and I knew that he was special to
Hi, I'm Steve.
Hi, Steve.
Finally we meet.
You look great.
I'm very, very choked up. I'm still grieving. I've only known about this for about a month, so I just feel I'd be amiss if I didn't say I love the guy. He's staring at me with that endearing but sarcastic smirk on his face and say, man up and just don't worry about me. And I just can't get over it, and just gonna miss him. That's all I can say.
Thanks. Thank you.
It's okay.
That won't be hard to do. We will all hold him in our hearts. It's our promise. He affected a lot of people in wonderful ways. So we will all do that, right?
Yes.
It's a promise. Thank you very much. Let's give Marc Rosenblatt one more round of applause.